Good morning, everybody. It feels like I'm just doing a regular recording because I know nobody's watching, so it's all right for me right now. I'm not really that concerned for the time being of how these things will be. But I would just like to monitor how these things are going along. And this morning, I will address a very critical topic, and it is now a concern of everyone. I had been listening to different broadcasts, podcasts, YouTube videos, live coverages, and all sort of things, and I'm so disturbed with what's going on. Let me say this morning that our topic actually is a very sensitive topic, and a lot of people do not understand it properly because they are looking on a very different dynamics of events. They're looking at it as purely political. But let me tell you that this thing is not happening in that particular dimension. Let me go back to exactly what is Israel. As you know it, Israel by itself is a name given by God. So let us go to the very concrete dynamics of these things. Therefore, this is religious dynamics. Israel was originally a name given by God in biblical history to Jacob, son of Isaac, grandson of Abraham or Abram. So when you look at that, this alone would tell you that this is really not a simple political event happening right now. Let me go to the Bible as a basic reference today. Of course, we'll be looking into different dates and time and events as part of our discussion this morning. But of course, the Bible will play a vital role because this is a religious topic. Now, if you look at this from other vista, using some other way of understanding this, you will be misled. In the book of Chronicles, Second Chronicles to be exact, that will be chapter 7, verse 14. Let me read it. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Taken from the King James Version of the Bible, that gives you a good context to this war. Excuse me. It would give you a sense of spiritual dynamics as to what is happening right now. On the context of this verse, God is speaking to King Solomon after he had finished building the temple in Jerusalem. God tells Solomon that he has heard his prayer and accepted the temple as a place of sacrifice. God also promises to bless Solomon and his descendants if they obey his commandment and walk his ways. However, God also warned Solomon that that warning is really something that I think, impacts today's event. He warned Solomon that if he and his people turn away from him and worship other gods, he will reject the temple and send disasters upon the land. And God then gives Solomon the condition for restoring his favor and healing the land, which are the words quoted in the verse that I just read to you. God's people who are called by his name are Israelites. There is no denying to that as we are looking at it right now from biblical perspective. The descendants of Abraham or Abraham later, Isaac, his only son, and of course Jacob came later with Esau, which you can, you know, uh, trace the lineage of the Israelites and Esau, from where you can continue the lineage of others, participants in the region. Of course, with Isaac, that is the original line to Abraham. But there's another son, of course, outside the marriage of Abraham with Sarah. There comes Hagar, and you have the son Ishmael. Now, God was saying to Solomon that he has chosen a special people, and that's Israel, and given them the land of Canaan. The purpose of Israel was to represent God's character and authority, and calling on his name means trusting and acknowledging him as the true living God and trusting his promises. Humbling themselves means recognizing their sinfulness and the need for God's mercy and grace. Praying means communicating with God and asking for his help and forgiveness. Seeking his face means desiring his presence and favor and following his will. And of course, turning from the wicked ways means repenting of the sins and changing the behavior to align with God's command. If they do these things, God promises to hear their prayers from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land from calamities that He had sent as a result of their disobedience. This verse shows God's love and faithfulness to His people, as well as His holiness and justice. It also shows the responsibility and accountability of His people to obey and worship Him alone. And it's one thing we should look at these dynamics right now and understand better what's going on in Israel. You had been hearing, of course, a lot from TV and YouTube. There's no denying of that. And all of this seem to really give you one big question. Why Israel is right there in the lion's den, in a manner of saying. Now everybody there want them dead. All these Arab people want to wipe them out. That's funny thing, when you think that this is 2023 and still you have this kind of thing, this kind of hatred that seemed to bring us to the medieval time. Wow. But it is true. And it is happening right in our time. Hearing those rhetoric of people in the US, Europe, those students, The woke culture is actually has engulfed the Western countries. If you look closely, you'd find out that Israel as a country has evolved and has started as God's people. They are there because God put them there. That alone gives you a very strong, um, how would I say that? A very foundational understanding of the presence of Israelis inside a non Jewish territory. And you would say, so they better get away from that place. Nah, because the earth is God's. And we know that. And that place, according to the Bible, was given to them. And the Arabs claim it for their own. Based on what? The Arab concept. And we Christians look at it almost in the same dynamics as the Jews. God granted, God has given, God has allotted that space of land for Israel. And so, looking from that perspective, you have Arabic, or I would say Islamic perspective. And then looking in another dimension, you have the Jewish Christian dimension. We can see here two opposing, not political, but religious dynamics. It's not political, it's religious dynamics of things. So the understanding properly that to be introduced into this ongoing events right now, every day it's filling our YouTube and Facebook, all these things. It's religious. This war is political to many eyes, but to those Christians, to those who are understanding the Bible, this war is a religious war. Even the word used by these fanatical people, Hamas, as they call themselves, they say they're the valiant, the brave ones. The word itself in Hebrew means violence. See? But let me go a little bit backwards, in the history. If you remember, God also commanded Israel to avoid, or not only avoid, but do not intermarry with their surrounding neighbors. And the purpose of that was to preserve the purity and faithfulness of God's people, or the chosen people of Israel. God wanted Israelites to be holy and set apart for his purpose. That's why they call him his people. Their purpose was to serve him and to give to the world a representation of what God is. They are set aside for a purpose. And obviously, as the days go by, Israel has forgotten this, has completely set it aside. They had been so occupied by politics, by commerce, by science, and many other things but God. Well, just looking at that from the outside dynamics. Now, They also forgot one thing: intermarriage. Classic example of this intermarriage that you can surmise God's indignation for this, of course, was the marriage in chapter 25 of Numbers, the book of Numbers. Some Israelite men were seduced by Moabite women to join in the worship of Baal of Peor, a false god. This caused a plague to break out among Israelites, killing 24,000 people. 24,000. Today we're only talking of how many? 1,300? Well, I'm not saying that that number is not big. But look at this. When they married these Moabite women, it caused them to suffer 24,000 people dying because of it, until Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, executed the couple who were involved in the sin. In Judges 3, another Israelite intermarried with the Canaanite, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, served their gods. This caused the Lord to be angry with them and deliver them to the hands of their enemies, until he raised up judges to save them. See? Another one is a record found in 1 Kings chapter 11. King Solomon, despite his wisdom, loved many foreign women from the nations that God had forbidden, and had 700 wives, holy, and 300 concubines. Oh my, how would you manage that? His wives turned his heart away from the Lord and led him to worship their gods, such as Ashtoreth, Milcom, Chemosh, Molech. This caused the Lord to be angry with him and to tear the kingdom away from him, leaving only one tribe to his son. See that? So Israel not only survived because the Lord has chosen them, preserved them, keep them. You could remember those wars that has been fought by Israel, and it was not them, but an angel of God fought for them many times, of course. And be reminded that the wars won by Israel many times was not because they were mighty, not because they're strong, they had better technology, but because God saved them. Very classic example: David and Goliath. David was no big man, Goliath was a giant. But despite that, Israel won. Why? Not because David was smarter, but because David was an instrument of God. You see the dynamics? The religious perspective here? Because if you look Israel as an ordinary nation, then you are completely wrong. You will not understand it. And you could also recall many war Israeli had in the past. Of course, they lost those battles. And one very peculiar battle was the battle of Israel against AI. It was a small group of people, but they were defeated. Why? Hmm? They disobeyed God. See, their victory and their failure in battle is dependent on their obedience to God. And then you may argue, well, that was in the old time. Yes, I would have to agree with you. However, if you look into the Bible, you'd find out that even salvation offered to the Christians, despite though it was through the intercession and through the suffering of Christ on the cross. If you look into the Bible, especially in the book of Hebrews, chapter 8, salvation comes through the commonwealth of Israel. Even Jesus Christ who died, he did not choose, I mean, God did not choose other race of man, but Israel. You have to be reminded of that. See? Not the Anglo Saxon, it's of course the British, not any other race of man, but Jew. Jesus was a Jewish. God has chosen not only the Jewish people, the Israelis, to represent him, but even when his son came down to the world, his identity as a person was a Jew. See, so there is so much religious dynamics and that's going on right now than political. I would like to bring your mind to Apostle Paul's position on Israel's role and salvation, of course. Is a complex and controversial topic when it comes to this, debated by scholars and theologians. Paul was a Jewish Christian. Okay, so I would have to make that clear. And maybe you're asking me, why am I opening this religious topic? By profession, I'm a theologian. Okay, so I know my topic. Now, Paul was a Jewish Christian, and he was commissioned by Christ, as you can remember that, in his way to Damascus to persecute the Christians. He was given a mission to promote Christianity. And Paul has a very deep concern to his fellow Jewish people who rejected Jesus as the Messiah. That's why Paul's letters in the New Testament reveal his view on God's plan of salvation involving Jews and Gentiles and how future Israel was related to fulfillment of God's promises. And if you look at Paul's concept, see, Paul believed that God has sent his son Jesus Christ to be the Savior of the world and that salvation was by grace through faith in him. And that's very clear in the Bible. I would not have to elaborate on that, so I'll just go, excuse me, fast on this topic. Number two, Paul distinguished between ethnic Israel, or the physical descendants of Abraham, and the spiritual Israel, those who share the faith of Abraham, whether a Jew or a Gentile. Okay? Now, by the way, let me give a perspective on that. When you are not a Jew, you're a Gentile. Either you're an Islam, a Hindu, a Christian, we're all Gentile. Okay? Get it? So, in the eyes of God, there are only two group of people: Jew, Gentile. Okay? So, whatever name of religion you have, it does not make you any better. You're just a Gentile if you're not a Jew. Simple as that. Okay, let's take it flat as it is. No offense to those who feel some other way, but that's the Bible is saying. And right now we're looking at this issue, we're inspecting, examining, scrutinizing these things from biblical perspective. As a theologian myself, right now I'm looking at it on that perspective. So he argued that not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel, and that God had always preserved a remnant Jew, a remnant faithful Jews, this Jewish, yeah, Jewish people who accepted the gospel. So God has preserved uh, faith believing Jewish people. I think that's the right framing of that. He also claimed that Gentiles who believed in Christ were grafted, uh, connected. This is an agricultural term, taken a bud and incised a wound into a tree, to make it more simple term, and inserted that is a process, what we call budding, grafted into that mother tree. Now in this parable and parallelism, God was kind of saying that Christ grafted into the olive tree of Israel and became part of God's people, because God's people, whether you like it or not, are Israelis. But of course, this time around, it's the spiritual Israeli. Because we have to be reminded that the purpose of God choosing Israel was not for political dominance, but for spiritual purpose. That's why when the Jewish people failed their spiritual mission, they lose that bearing before God. But if you look into Paul's argument, you'd find out that Paul, despite his acknowledgement of Israel being rejected by God because of their hardened heart and in their unbelief, he still, in a way, explains God's mysterious plan, which of course allowed Gentiles to receive the gospel and provoke Jewish jealousy. He also warned the Gentiles not to be arrogant or boastful, but to fear God and remain in his kindness. You see, we're just grafted. Remember that. We are not Jewish. We're not God's people. We're just given the privilege. We're just adopted. Okay, if you want to look at it in a more um humanistic dynamics, okay, because that one, the first parallelism was agricultural, or is sort of parallel between the plant. So now let's look at it in more humanistic side. Let's say adopted. You're just adopted. Yes, you have the right of a son, but you are not a son by blood. You are not a daughter by blood. You are just taken into the family by reason of what? Legality. No blood. See? You have the right? Yes. Privileges? Yes. Blood? No. That's the legal perspective. I can say that um, with very much assurance, because I'm also an officer of the court before, so former, should I say. So Paul expressed his hope that Israel's rejection was not final. It's a hope, Paul, and I would have to agree with that. It was not final rejection, because God, though of course this is deviating from Paul's assumption, because God has given the same accommodation given to Gentiles, to us, to the Israelites, to be brought back. But this time around, it's not anymore collective but individual. Okay? If before they were given that corporate choosing, that corporate responsibility, that corporate chance and privilege, this time around, the coming to God is just by their personal choice. Well, Paul's dynamics of teaching was rather going on the other direction. It's like he's kind of declaring that his hope was that the rejection of God of Israel was temporary and that God has not completely cast away his people. He declared that in this way all Israel will be saved, meaning there will be a time that a large number of Jews will turn to Christ and receive God's mercy. Well, I don't really know how that thing would be possible because even right now, the Jewish people still call us Gentiles, of course, and they seem not to be acknowledging Christ or Jesus Christ. But, well, God is not limited to human dynamics of things. God is always unlimited when it comes to that. So he affirmed that God's gift and God's calling are both irrevocable and that he will fulfill his covenant with Israel. I have several sources for these things, but I will not be going into the details of that. So, these things, of course, if you want to look at, I mean, to find these things I'm trying to discuss right now, these things are taken from the letters of Paul from chapter 9 and 11 to the Romans. So it's the letters of Paul to the Romans, chapter 9 and 11. So how many chapters? 9, 10, 11. Three chapters all in all. Where he addressed Israel's issues and role in salvation in detail. If you want to look at that, Romans chapters 9 and 9 to 11. And however, there are different interpretations, of course, when it comes to Paul's writing. It's not easy to understand Paul, especially when you are not really a theologian. A lot of people today trying to discuss Paul's writing, they can't even read the classical or Koine Greek, and yet they're trying to attempt to interpret Paul's writing. And so you have more chaos than explanation. So therefore, it is really important to study carefully Paul's writing, his writing, and to have a good understanding of the classical Greek. Because the writings of Paul, unlike the writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those books of the Bible were written in Koine Greek or ordinary Greek, whereas Paul's writing were written in classical Greek. The difference is like reading the letter written by a classroom teacher when it comes to the book written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, while those letters written by Paul is comparative to the decision of the Supreme Court. Okay? I think now you have a good perspective what I'm talking about. Why it is not easy for people to understand the writings of Paul, and why there are many people who are misled because they perceive that they can understand, but in reality they can't. Just like when you are reading the decision of the Supreme Court and you're a layman and you think you can understand. And at the end of the day, you cannot. That's the bad side of that. So the history of Israel is complex, and you have the Christian, the throes, and I mean the ups and downs of that in the Bible, both in history and biblical records. It has lost its territory several times from the time of Abraham, if you recall from that. Around 2000 BC, God promised Abraham his descendants the land of Canaan, which roughly corresponds to the modern Israel and Palestine, of course. That line there, the Palestinian, that Gaza Strip and the West Bank and the entire Israeli, that portion has been apportioned by God to Israel. It was given to them, not to any other people, but to Israel. Okay. Around 1800 BC, God's grandson Jacob, also known as Israel, he was given by God that name when he wrestled with God's angel. Of course, in some other interpretation, he wrestled with Christ, no less. He was given the name Israel. And of course, his 12 sons settled in Canaan, forming the 12 tribes of Israel. Around 1700 BC, a famine forced Israelites to migrate to Egypt. Remember Joseph's story? And there, after Joseph's death, when the Pharaoh was changed, because if you look into biblical history, during the time of Joseph as governor of Egypt, the, the Pharaoh in Egypt was no Egyptian. He was an Akkadian, okay? Because Egypt was besieged by Akkadian people. It was not only besieged, but it was overthrown. I mean, the power of Egypt. But of course, you cannot find that in Egyptian history because history in Egypt is actually being kept intact and its integrity as much as possible. They are taking away all the bad things that happened to them and just put the good ones. But if you go to some other records, you'd find out that they had been besieged. And during the time of Joseph, and I don't want to go into much details of that, the Pharaoh at the time was not Egyptian but Akkadian. Okay, I will not go into so much detail. Around 1400 BC, 1450, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt into what we call Exodus. And after 40 years, roughly, by the way, they made it after 2 years, sort of, to the border, but then they did not obey God's voice. They did not have faith enough in God, so they were told by God, go back. So you're there looking at Canaan, and then God was kind of not satisfied with their performance as his people. They were what? Trained. Go back. Go back to your training. Go back to the desert and learn your lesson. 38 long years. And so that comprises the 40 years time. They made it after 2 years, but God was not satisfied for what they had in their hearts and in their minds. See, relationship with God is not a matter of the name of your religion, but a matter of your connection. My connection, your connection to God. That what matters most. See, look at that. This particular incident, you can extract that from the biblical fact. Now let's proceed. Around 1050 BC, the Israelites established a united monarchy under Saul, and you have David, and then Solomon. And of course, Solomon, because David was not allowed by God to build his temple, Solomon built the temple. David prepared everything, Solomon built it. That's it. 950 BC, the kingdom split into two. You have the northern kingdom of Israel, and you have the southern kingdom of Judah. Okay? And then around 722 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel was conquered and they were deported by Assyrians. 10 of its tribes became known as the lost tribes of Israel. Okay? You still have the picture? I hope you do. Let's continue to that. So, for so many years, we have the people of Israel to have, in a way, known to enter the state of what we call diaspora or scattered, dispersion. I'm not sure if many of you have heard of the term. So, this term diaspora was applied to the Jews because they were scattered throughout the world. Even at the time, the purpose of God was technically still to scatter not all his people, but scatter also knowledge about him. Funny as it may seem, but God has ways, even in calamity, to bring hope, peace, and even divine knowledge to anyone, regardless of what you believe on. So this dispersion of the Jew from their ancestral land was taken by the Arab as an opportunity to seize the land. You see that? When the Jews were not there, Arab came in and they call it their own. Of course, this dispersion of the Jew, it began with the first temple destructed by Babylonians. Remember the story? At around 586 BC. And of course, the last that was the final blow, shall I say, was done by the Romans in 70 AD. Remember that? Okay. And totally, the Jews was banished completely from Jerusalem on, yeah, but it's around 135 AD. Okay. 135 AD. That was the time when they were completely banished from Jerusalem. But it does not in any way mean that the land is no longer their land. They're just out. They were just sent out by God from their land because they have so much to learn, I guess. The rejection of Jesus Christ. That is one thing they have to learn. And for nearly 2 millennia, it's 2,000 years, the Jews lived as minority in various countries of the world, regions such as Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, where they faced persecution, discrimination, and name what, many other things. In 19th century and early 20th century, a movement called Zionism emerged among Jews and especially in Europe who advocate for the establishment of a Jewish state in their ancestral homeland of Israel as a solution to Jewish question and the fulfillment of the biblical promise. In 1917, during the World War I, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration. 1917, the Balfour Declaration, which expressed support for the creation of a Jewish nation or a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, because I've told you before, their land, when they left, was taken over by the Arabs. Now, Palestine is not actually a group of people, the Palestinian. It's simply because after that final besiege of the Roman, The emperor of Rome called the land Palestine. Okay, and that, I don't know what's the reason behind it, but the emperor called it Palestine. And when the Arabs came over, because that portion of the land has been ruled and overtaken by the Ottoman Empire, current day Turkey, that's why it has been a home for the Islamic people. See, it's not theirs. They took it by force, or by opportunity, should I guess, because they had the opportunity to take it. And then now they are crying and saying it's theirs. And the Jews has to get out because they have to take it back as their own. Look at these people. Well, I have nothing against them, but that greed, if they're saying that they love Muslim, how many Muslim countries there? It's almost the entire West Asian region of Muslim. But they don't want their own people. They don't want this Palestinian because they want the Jews out. That's the reason behind it. They're just being greedy. In 1922, after World War I, the League of Nations granted Britain a mandate over Palestine. So it started with the British people. They have now the power, which included the territory of modern Israel and Jordan, that was subjected to the power of British people. Under the mandate, Britain was supposed to facilitate the Jewish immigration, the coming back and settlement in Palestine, which of course has some respect to the, how would I say this, de facto rights of the Arab population there, because they're there, the illegal settlers. It's not their land, but they're there by chance and opportunity, and they seize it, and they are calling it their own. And they want the owners, no, 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 you are not coming back to your land. This is ours now. Look at that. However, the British policy has faced so much opposition and resistance from both the Jews and the Arabs, who had conflicting claims and aspiration over the land. The Jews wanted a Jewish state, while the Arabs wanted an Arab state, or a unified Syria. You see, the situation was further complicated by the rise of Nazi Germany and, of course, the Holocaust. You can recall that, which increased the Jewish immigration and the urgency of the Zionist cause. In 1947, World War II, the United Nations proposed a partition of that would be divide Palestine into two states, a Jewish state and an Arab. Of course, what should have been done was to actually take the Arabs from that land, put them in Arabic states, and just give that piece of land to the Jew, because there's so much land occupied by Arabs. See, how many Arab states you have? Name it. So much. It's only one space for the Jew. And yet the Arab are so greedy that they wanted every piece, every part of that land theirs, just like China. See? Look at that dynamics, that religious perspective. This is not an issue between Arab and Jew. This is actually an issue between Islamic people and Jewish people. That's why whenever they shout, I mean the Arab people, whenever they shout, they chant about eradicating the Jews, they always say what? What? They're kind of declaring some sort of war against the Jew. because they are not Muslim. And you Christians sympathizing with Muslim, hmm? They have the same chant for you. The Jew might, for some reason, abhor us Christians, but they do not have the intent to kill us. That's the difference. You see, they abhor us because we are Gentiles, but the Muslim wants to eliminate us because they want the entire world maybe for their own. See the difference? So these disturbing concepts of religion is actually the cause of the problem of the world. Well, I'm not espousing John Lennon's concept of saying that imagine all the people has no religion and all that. But truly, when we talk about relationship of people in the world, it is just being made complicated by religion. When we speak of salvation, salvation from the dynamics of the Bible or Christian mind, it's not about religion. It's about relation with God. So, proceeding to the concept, because you know the power of the British people, later on, their power made it possible for the Jews to resettle. Arabs rejected it, but the power of the British Empire is just overwhelming. And because they really cannot accept it, so they had a war. See, the first war was made against the Jews by Egypt and other Arab countries surrounding. On May 14, 1948, the Jewish Agency, representative of the body of the Jewish community in Palestine, declared establishment of the State of Israel with David Ben Gurion as the first prime minister. So the first prime minister of Israel was David. Wow, that's, that's great. David Ben Gurion, meaning David, the son of Gurion. Ben meaning son, okay? David Ben Gurion, meaning David, the son of Gurion, as its first prime minister. And then that declaration was recognized by the United States. Wonder who was next? The Soviet Union. Okay, the Soviet Union. United States, Soviet Union, of course, the instigator of that was the British people and other countries, but not of any Arab state. They fought against it. They do not want it. So the war ended in 1949 with an armistice that established the borders of Israel, which were larger than the proposed by the UN partition plan. So Israel also gained control of West Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, the West Bank were occupied by Jordan, and Gaza Strip occupied by Egypt. That was before. Since then, the state of Israel was faced several wars and conflicts with Arab neighbors. The Palestinians, of course, always a thorn on their side, who claims the same land as their own. They're forgetting that they were there because of what? They were there because of what? Opportunity. When the owners of the land went away, they occupied it. So they had these challenges. The status of Jerusalem, the fate of the Palestinian refugees, and the Jewish settlements in occupied territories and recognition of Israel's right to exist are remaining an unsolved issues. It's unresolved until today. And today it seems to creep up with another war. You see? So if you look at that on a biblical perspective, it is very complicated because only of what? Belief system. You have Islamic claims. Remember that Islamic people are also sons of Abraham. That are sons, children of Abraham, so to say, because they belong to Ishmaelites. Ishmael being also a son of Abraham from Hagar, who is actually not a wife of Abraham, but a maid of his wife Sarah. But the legal son, Isaac, is the grandparent of Israelites today. So, based on historical records, we have this legal and illegal people of Abraham. Both are descendants of Abraham. Illegal son and the legal son. And the illegal wants everything for his own. They want everything for their own, while the legal son want only a piece of land. Look how funny that is. And a lot of people today who has no knowledge of history, no knowledge of, or understanding of the Bible, seem to take side unwittingly with the illegal claims. Now, you might ask the question, why am I addressing this topic when the Philippines is not involved? And my channel is more dedicated on the Philippines' involvement on the affairs or geopolitical aspects or affairs in Asia. Well, here we go. The Philippines was the only Asian country to vote in favor of the United Nations Resolution number 181 in 1947, which paved the way to the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. See, among the people here in Asia, only Philippines voted for that UN Resolution 181 that in 1948 created the State of Israel. It was in 1947 when it was voted, and 1948 that resolution took effect. The vote was courageous, principled stand by the Philippines, which faced pressure, you see, from the neighbors, of course, right here in Asia. Look at who are the neighbors of Israel in Asia: China, Buddhist, and Indian, China, Buddhist, and combination of a bit of Hindu for that matter. India is full Hindu, a little bit of Islam. Thailand is Buddhist. Indonesia Islamist. Malaysia Islamist. Think about that. So Philippines was one of the few countries also that opened the doors to the Jewish refugees fleeing from the Nazi persecution way back in the early 1930s and 1940s. So under the leadership of President Manuel Quezon, the Philippines issued visas and provided sanctuary for about 1,300 Jews. Wow, just like exactly how many Jews were killed by the Hamas. 1,300 saved by Philippines. While Arabs, modern Arabs, which we call them there, next to the Jewish community as Palestinian, but they're Arabs. Simple way to say it. That's why some of the relatives are in Egypt, in Jordan, in Turkey, because they are Arabs. See, and they were welcomed by the Filipino people right here. They were refugees, and of course, later on, they moved back to Israel. You see, but there are still a lot of Israeli in the Philippines right now. They're staying here, no problem at all. Filipinos are so friendly to them, accommodating to them. Filipino people love Israeli right here. They have no problem whatsoever. See, our Muslims here are under control by the government. You only have problem with Muslim when you cannot control them. And sometimes, sad to say, the Muslim here in the Philippines has always been, in a way, um, steered into rebellion by, of course, it's not really that founded, but a lot of evidence would show and has been shown that Malaysia is responsible for that, though they had been, in effect, trying to pacify, trying to pacify, but they actually are instigating them because Malaysia has a very selfish motive for another piece of land of the Philippines that now they are still occupying illegally. That's the Sabah. You see, Malaysia, our good bad neighbor, is helping us to have problem by instigating these Muslim people of Mindanao to be our own enemy. And so the Philippine government has technically killed so many Muslims here because of Malaysia. So Filipino killing Filipino because of religion. You see the dynamics of religion? I remember one philosopher said that one of the greatest poison invented by a man is religion. They killed so many. More than 1 billion people killed because of religion. We do not set aside, of course, the blood on the hand of the Catholic Church. Of course, Catholic is not a Christian church. It is a hybrid church of pagan and Christianity. Okay, it's not Christian pure. It's not pagan pure. It is a hybrid. Now, I may not talk about that. It's another topic. The Philippines and Israel also has formed more than 14 bilateral agreements so far. Mutual cooperations, of course, for mutual benefits. And recently, on June 5, 2023, the Philippines has signed a special cooperation, mutual cooperation actually, between Israel and the Philippines on matters relating to defense, agriculture, science and technology, and many other things. That was June 5, 2023, just a few months ago. Also, the Philippines has been consistent supporter of Israel in the international arena, especially in the United Nations, where um, it has often voted in favor of Israel's interests and against resolutions that are biased or unfair to Israel. Philippines has also expressed its sympathy and solidarity with Israel in times of crisis and conflict, such as the recent escalation of violence with Hamas in Gaza. So the Philippines has been a reliable partner of Israel in the field of development and innovation, especially in the areas of agriculture, water, renewable energy. The Philippines has benefited from Israel's expertise and technology in the sectors and has also shared its own best practices and experiences with Israel. So the two countries has been collaborating in various projects and programs that aim to improve the lives and livelihoods of their people, such as Mashav program, that is a agri studies program, and the DOST ISA program. If you heard of that, DOST ISA program. And the Philippines has been a source of skilled and compassionate workers for Israel, especially in taking care of the uh, retirees, the old people, especially in the health and caregiving also sector. There are about 30,000 Filipinos working in Israel, mostly taking care of elderly and disabled. These workers are highly valued and respected by their employers in the Israeli society and are considered part of the extended family of Israel. As we consider also Israeli here in the Philippines who are living with us in our communities as extended part of the Filipino community. The Philippines also has been a destination of choice of Israeli tourists who enjoy the natural beauty and warmth and hospitality of the country. Okay, I'll be sharing to you several other um, agreements. Okay, there are many, but I will not. I'll be sharing only some of this. Let's start with the Treaty of Friendship signed way back in 1958, February 26. The Treaty of Friendship, establishing full diplomatic relations and expressed the spirit of perpetual peace and firm, lasting friendship. That's the context. Perpetual peace and firm and lasting friendship between the two countries. That is the Treaty of Friendship, February 26, 1958. So, longest friend of Israel in Asia is the Philippines. For those who doesn't know that yet. The Memorandum of Understanding on Bilateral and Diplomatic Dialogue, signed in 1997, it's institutionalized the regular consultations. It institutionalized the cooperation between the respective foreign ministers of the two countries, and that institutionalization has given the easier facilitation of the foreign relations between the two countries. So we have this institutionalization of uh, bilateral political relationship. So that's it. And then we have also an agreement of cooperation in fields of science and technology signed in 2014. Okay. Aside from that institutionalization, we have cooperation in science and technology. And we have, of course, seminars and other projects that comes with that. Technological domains, of course, is the concern. And in 2019, we have another one, an agreement on social security. 2019, it addresses the benefits for protection to Filipino and Israeli workers and their families who reside or work in either country. So those Israelis here and those Filipinos there. That's the spirit of the agreement. And then in 2021, the Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement, or the IPA or IPPA, signed in 2021. It was aimed to enhance the bilateral economic relations and encourage investments between the two countries. And then, of course, comes 2021 again, the time you have another cooperation agreement with Israel Innovation Authority, okay, which sought to foster collaboration, innovation in the fields of agriculture, water, and renewable energy. And then we have another MOU on defense cooperation, which is currently, as I told you, uh, this has been signed June 5, 2023. This is the latest of all this agreement. So this mutual understanding recently on defense and cooperation is the latest. signed on June 2023. So June 5, 2023. 4 months after, you have the war. Technically, Philippines is involved because of this. So that's another dimension or dynamics of what's going on right now. And I know some people cannot understand it because they look at it as a simple affair, political affair. But the real thing is, this is not a simple political affair. It is a complex event happening, and it is a challenge for international community. But it is more compounded challenge for Christians to look at it in the way that Christians should understand it. So let us be more careful how we address this ongoing problem of Israel right now in the territory. Christians who consider themselves Christians should take a closer look at this. And those who started to embrace Islam, be mindful what you're embracing. Be mindful what you are chanting, because maybe you're just hyped to embrace something that you do not understand. I really doubt that you do. So this is scary because the war is kind of spilling over. Let us take it seriously. Be more responsible for our actions, our words, our contacts, whenever we're reacting on these matters, because this is a big problem now faced by Asian community. And of course, not only us in Asia, but the rest of the world, as it is now taxing so much from the economies helping Israel, like the United States and Europe, with the exception of Turkey, which is now an enemy of Israel. So it is a changer of alliances of the world. See, with that in mind, Philippines is more worried, or should be more worried about it. Why? Because we have here Muslims inside our territory. See that? And close to us, we have Malaysia. Very problematic. So this clash of religious minds could create a bigger problem than what it is right now. Let's just pray, Christian, Jew, Muslim. Perhaps that you would have that broader perspective of mind. I remember the poem of Richard Browning, it says, "The Christ and crowning glory of all good, life's final star is brotherhood." With that in mind, I would like to say thank you to anyone who might see this later, and may God bless you. Goodbye.